So if your seventh graders are, absolutely cheering at a baking soda volcano in your science class, you might, you might actually be doing them a huge disservice.
Right. I know it sounds super counterintuitive, maybe even a little harsh, but there is just this massive difference between like temporary entertainment and actual scientific sense making.
Yeah, totally. And welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are talking directly to you today, especially if you're, middle school science educator in the trenches.
Exactly. The folks building out that phenomenon-driven seventh grade life science instruction.
Right, right. So today, we're stepping into this really specific kind of mental space that we like to call the Bioforge.
Oh, I love the Bioforge concept.
That's great, right? So we want you to visualize this immersive solar punk field laboratory. Just picture your students gathered around this slightly weathered, verdigris teal workbench.
Which is what, like that perfect, deep, earthy blue-green color?
Exactly. Hex code 2F7C74, if we're being, super specific. But yeah, they have these field journals open. There are these intricate mossy terrariums breathing nearby, and magnifying lenses just resting on specimen cards.
And in a space like that, I mean, the questions that your students generate aren't just, bullet points you write on a dry erase board. They become the actual tools of discovery. They have real weight.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to unpack why the science and engineering practice of asking questions and defining problems is the absolute foundational entry point to the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, and Alaska Science Learning.
Because if we agree that just blowing things up for the sake of it is, well, basically just theater, how does a teacher actually capture that initial wow factor?
And safely funnel it into a rigorous investigation. I mean, where do you even start without just completely losing control of a room full of 12-year-olds?
Well, you have to start by fundamentally shifting the entire goal of the lesson. Like, for a really long time, the goal was just learning about a topic.
Yeah, like the teacher is the encyclopedia, right?
Exactly. The teacher stands up there, dispenses facts about mitosis or the mitochondria, and the student's job is just to catch those facts and repeat them on a Friday quiz.
Right. But the NGSS demands this big shift to figuring out a phenomena.
Yes. And when you center your instruction on a puzzling event, asking questions becomes the natural required cognitive entry point. I mean, you simply cannot figure out a complex event without first asking how or why it's happening.
It creates this genuine need to know, like an itch they have to scratch.
Exactly. And reading through our Bioforge source material today, there's this really sharp distinction drawn between the scientist and the engineer in this whole process.
Yeah, I noticed that. So they're both standing at that verdigris teal workbench. They're both asking questions, but they are operating with, completely different worldviews.
They really are. And understanding that difference, it totally changes how you guide your students. So scientists ask and refine questions that lead to descriptions or explanations and investigations of the natural world.
Because they want to uncover the hidden mechanisms, right? Like pulling the world apart to see the gears turning.
Right. But engineers, they define problems. They look at the designed world and identify what needs to change. They don't just ask, how does this work? They ask, what does success look like?
Which is what we call the criteria.
Exactly, criteria. And then they ask, what limitations do we have to work within? Which are the constraints?
Okay, so let me make sure I've got this. The scientist is looking at a flooded river and asking, why is the water volume peaking 3 weeks earlier than it did a decade ago?
Right, seeking an explanation.
But the engineer is asking, what criteria and constraints do we need to consider to, design a levee system that protects the town without completely destroying the downstream ecosystem?
That is the exact distinction. Spot on. And when we look at the specific middle school progression, so grades 6 through 8, the expectations here level up significantly from elementary school.
Yeah, they really do. A seventh grader shouldn't just be asking broad, generalized questions like, why did the river flood?
Right. They need to be asking questions that clarify missing evidence or interrogate models. They need to specify relationships between independent and dependent variables.
They're basically actively learning the architecture of scientific argumentation.
Exactly. And there is this line in the Bioforge philosophy that I just love. It says, good questions are not necessarily fancy. They're useful.
Useful. I mean, useful sounds a bit dry on the surface, honestly.
It does.
But think of it like a magnifying glass on our solar punk workbench. It doesn't need to have this ornate gold-plated handle, right? It just needs to focus the light enough to actually start a fire.
Oh, I love that analogy. Yes. A question needs to ignite an actual investigation. And a question is only useful in 7th grade if it gives the class a clear path forward.
Right, like if a kid asks, why do animals act weird sometimes? The light isn't focused at all.
No, not at all. But if they ask, how does the specific dietary behavior of a koala affect its probability of surviving a bushfire? Boom. That focuses the light immediately.
Because it identifies variables. It points directly to an investigation about genetics, environment, and natural selection.
Exactly. It tells the class exactly what evidence they need to go out and gather next.
Which, okay, brings us to the real friction of this whole process.
Yeah.
If a useful question is a tool that sparks an investigation, what happens when a teacher accidentally hands their students a broken tool?
Yeah, that's where things get messy.
Because the sources spend a lot of time dissecting these common pedagogical traps that teachers fall into when they try to make science fun.
We definitely have to look at the EQAP rubric warnings here. So the EQAP rubric is this tool used to evaluate the quality of NGSS-aligned materials, and it explicitly calls out what we can refer to as engagement theater.
Engagement theater, that's such a great phrase.
It's so accurate. And there are three major offenders here: the hook, the bookend, and the application.
Okay, I have to confess, I am totally guilty of the bookend from my first year of teaching.
Oh, we've all been there. Tell me about it.
So I wanted to teach this unit on animal adaptations, right? So on Monday, I showed this incredible high-definition video of a mantis shrimp punching a crab. Just mind-blowing stuff.
And the kids are probably obsessed.
Oh, they were amazed. But then I proceeded to teach dry textbook vocabulary for 3 straight days.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And by Thursday, when I finally asked them to apply the vocabulary back to the mantis shrimp, they had completely forgotten about the video. Like, the phenomena wasn't driving the learning at all. It was just a commercial at the beginning of the unit.
Yeah, that is the classic bookend trap. The phenomenon is entirely disconnected from that messy middle part of the learning.
Yeah.
And then you have the hook, which is when you use a flashy phenomenon like, let's say, the baking soda volcano, just to grab their attention. But then the teacher immediately steps in and just explains the chemical reaction to them.
So the students don't actually investigate anything.
Exactly. They just watch a magic trick and then listen to a lecture.
And then the application is when you teach all the science concepts first, totally in a vacuum, and then you bring in a real-world problem at the very end.
Right, just so they can practice the vocabulary they already memorized.
Yeah.
In all three of those cases, the phenomenon is really just a decorative hood ornament.
It's not the engine.
Not at all. The sources also warn heavily against confusing interesting with investigable.
Oh, this is a big one.
Huge! Blowing something up in the classroom is highly interesting. Every 12-year-old on the planet is going to pay attention to that.
Sure, obviously.
But you can't really investigate the chemical bonds of an explosion deeply with, standard 7th grade lab tools.
All right. But on the other hand, putting a piece of celery in salt water to observe osmosis, I mean, it might seem boring at first glance.
But it is highly investigable, because when that celery gets squishy and weird the next day, it creates this, cognitive dissatisfaction.
The students look at it and go, wait, why did it do that?
Exactly. And that dissatisfaction is the engine of conceptual change. If you just hit them with explosions, you aren't building a pathway for them to resolve that dissatisfaction.
Right, it's just a sugar rush.
Yes. And the other major trap here is cognitive overload, or TMI, too much information.
Oh, like front-loading the unit.
Yeah. If you give students all the vocabulary terms and procedural steps before they've even had a chance to explore the phenomenon, you completely kill their curiosity. You are answering questions they haven't even had a chance to ask yet.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
If my 7th graders are wide awake, they are laughing, and they're actually paying attention to the explosion, isn't that a win? Like, why are we calling that engagement theater like it's a bad thing?
I get that pushback all the time. But we have to separate temporary adrenaline from deep conceptual coherence. Excitement is really just an adrenaline spike.
Okay, true.
If you walk up to a student during an engagement theater lesson and ask, hey, what are you trying to figure out right now? They will usually say, oh, I'm watching the teacher blow something up, or I'm following step 4 on this worksheet.
Ah, they don't own the learning.
Exactly. They don't own it. NGSS demands what we call epistemic agency.
Epistemic agency. Let's unpack that, because that is a very heavy academic phrase.
It is, yeah. But essentially just means the kid isn't mindlessly following a recipe. They are actually the head chef of their own experiment.
I love that. They can explain why they're doing an activity and how it connects to answering a larger question that they themselves helped generate.
Right. Agency lasts. Theater fades the second the bell rings.
Okay, so if we agree that engagement theater only offers the illusion of learning, How does a teacher actually build a reliable, cognitively restrained pathway from that initial spark to a real investigation?
Well, this is where the rubber really meets the road. The sources outline a very specific 6-step practical classroom framework.
And this framework is critical, right? Because it provides those explicit scaffolds. You can't just throw a complex phenomenon at a 12-year-old and say, go ahead, ask scientific questions.
Oh, their brains will totally overload. You have to channel their prior experiences into motivated learning step by step. So step 1 is notice. What do we physically observe?
And wait, why do we have to start with notice before we let them ask questions?
Because if they don't anchor themselves in concrete physical observations first, their adolescent brains will jump straight to wild, untethered conclusions.
Ah, right. Aliens did it.
Exactly. This is basically the C part of the see, think, wonder visual thinking routine. No hypotheses yet, just the raw facts.
Okay, got it. Then we move to step 2. Wonder.
Yeah.
What do we want to know? And this is where you allow the broad, raw curiosity to just flow without judging it, right?
Yes, let them get it all out on the table. Which leads us to step 3, which honestly might be the most important part of the whole framework. Sort. We have to categorize these wonders.
Like, is this a science question, an engineering problem, an opinion, or a research question?
Exactly.
I really love the sort step. It operates like triage in our field lab.
Triage is a perfect way to describe it.
Because we aren't throwing away the student who asks an opinion question or a research question. We're just putting those questions in the right specimen jars so we can focus our immediate energy on the investigable ones.
Right, it validates the student's curiosity while keeping the lesson strictly aligned with the standards. You don't lose them, but you don't lose the plot either.
So once we've sorted them, we move to step 4, refine. We take a raw science question and ask, can we investigate this with evidence here in our classroom?
Yes. And step 5 is plan. What data, observations, or information would actually help us answer this refined question?
And finally, step 6 is return. How does answering this specific question help us make sense of the anchor phenomenon we started with?
Which is so crucial because this step ensures the class doesn't just get lost in the weeds.
Let's run a real 7th grade life science example through this machine. Let's take genetics and inherited traits.
Oh, perfect. The sources use the identical twin paradox for this.
Okay, so let's say I'm the 7th grader. You show me a picture of 2 identical twins, but one is noticeably taller or maybe has a different health condition. My brain immediately goes, wait, if their DNA is exactly the same, they should be exactly the same.
Right, it feels like a glitch in the matrix to them.
Yeah, it creates that necessary cognitive dissatisfaction we talked about. So we start the framework. Step 1, notice. I say, okay, I see 2 people who look exactly alike, but one is taller.
Perfect. Step 2, wonder. I wonder why they aren't the same if they have the exact same DNA.
Step 3, sort. We triage that. It's not an opinion. It's not an engineering design problem. It's a science question about genetics and environment.
Exactly. Then step 4, refine. Can we investigate how environmental factors influence the growth of organisms with similar genetics?
Which leads right into step 5, plan.
Yeah.
As a class, we might say, well, we can't experiment on human twins, obviously,
Exactly.
but we could grow genetically identical plants under different light or water conditions to model this.
And then finally, step 6, return. So, after the plant experiment, we return to the twins. If the environment changed how our plants grew, maybe the twins' different environments changed how their identical DNA instruction manual was actually read by their bodies.
Wow, that is profound for a 12-year-old. You just took them from, why do they look different, to a visceral understanding of epigenetics.
It's incredible when it works. They realize that DNA isn't absolute destiny. It's an instruction manual, but the environment is the reader.
But I mean, getting a classroom of 37th graders to that realization requires incredible restraint from the teacher.
Oh, absolute restraint.
So what are the exact words a teacher should be using when they are standing at that verdigris teal workbench?
The language is everything here. The sources emphasize highly effective, cognitively restrained teacher language. You have to use sentence stems that prompt thinking without giving away the answer. And honestly, the power is often in the pause. Instead of saying, look at the condensation forming on the outside of this can, you simply ask, what do you notice first?
Oh, that's good. And when a student throws out an idea, you don't immediately say correct or incorrect. You follow up with, what makes you say that?
Yes. It forces them to provide their own evidence. If they propose a theory, you ask, could we collect evidence for that? Or What would we need to observe or measure to know if that's true?
And during that triage phase in step 3, the teacher doesn't actually have to sort the questions for the students.
No, not at all. You hand the cognitive load right back to them. You ask the room, is this a science question, a design problem, or a question for research?
And if they identify it as an engineering problem, you immediately pivot and ask, okay, what criteria would make a solution successful? And what constraints do we have to work within?
Exactly. And this language applies beautifully across the entire 7th grade life science curriculum.
Let's look at the unit on cells and living things. The phenomenon in the sources is McKenna, a girl experiencing mysterious digestive symptoms.
Right. And if you just tell the students, today we're learning about cell walls, they completely tune out.
But if you start with McKenna's symptoms and ask, what do you notice first about her weight loss after eating? You start this really messy trial and error process.
They start tracing the food through her system, and they eventually realize the food is, like, disappearing, which means it has to be absorbing through a barrier.
So they are discovering the function of the cell boundary in the small intestine, entirely because they have a genuine need to know why McKenna is sick.
Yes. The same thing happens in the sensory receptors unit. The phenomenon there is the phantom limb sensation.
Right, someone feeling pain in an arm they no longer have.
Exactly. So you ask the class, what would we need to observe to understand how the brain is misinterpreting these signals? You treat the nervous system like a computer that's just receiving a glitchy input.
Let's really look at the ecosystems and biodiversity unit, because this highlights the engineering side perfectly. The anchor phenomenon is the introduction of invasive zebra mussels into a lake.
Yes. And if you ask a 7th grader how to fix that, their first instinct is almost always to build a giant underwater vacuum cleaner to just suck up all the mussels.
Which sounds awesome, honestly, but it completely ignores reality.
Right. So the teacher steps in with that restrained language and asks, what constraints do we have to work within?
Oh, and that forces the student to realize, oh wait, a giant vacuum would also suck up all the native fish and plants.
Exactly. The messy reality of defining constraints forces them to design a habitat solution that actually works within the delicate balance of the ecosystem.
Now, in a real classroom, all of these generated questions and constraints, they have to live somewhere, right? The sources talk extensively about the driving question board, or the DQB.
Yeah, the DQB is basically the visual manifestation of the student's epistemic agency. It's where you physically cluster all those refined questions on sticky notes.
But it cannot just be a poster that gathers dust in the back of the room.
No, absolutely not. Highly effective classrooms use a navigation routine. Every single day, you start by looking at the DQB and asking the class, which of our questions does that help us answer today?
Which proves to the students that their questions are the actual engine driving the unit.
Exactly.
Okay, I have a highly practical question for you, representing the teachers listening right now.
Okay, shoot.
Middle schoolers are famously chaotic.
Very true.
If you are teaching the genetics unit, and a student raises their hand and asks a totally off-the-wall question that threatens to derail the entire lesson like, could a koala survive on Mars? How do you use this framework to redirect them without, crushing that glowing spark of curiosity?
Oh, this is a classic tension between validation and coherence. In the old days, the teacher might just say, that's off topic, put your hand down.
But that totally crushes the spark.
It does. So instead, you use the sorting framework. You say, that is an amazing question. Let's sort it together. Is that something we can investigate with our classroom equipment right now? Or is that a research question for an astrophysicist?
And the student will almost always admit it's a research question.
Exactly. You validate it.
Yeah.
You write koala on Mars on a sticky note. You physically place it in the research or future jar on the DQB, and then you pivot smoothly.
You just say, let's look back at our koala diet question. How can we test that today?
Yes. You save their spark, you honor their curiosity, but you completely protect the pathway of the lesson. It creates this safe culture where every single question is valued, but not every question requires an immediate classroom lab.
That's brilliant. As we bring this deep dive to a close, let's summarize the stakes for our 7th grade educators listening today.
Sure.
The practice of asking questions and defining problems is not a decorative hook meant to trick kids into paying attention. It is a living field guide for better thinking.
Absolutely. It requires established routines, incredibly careful language, and explicit scaffolding like our 6-step framework to turn raw wonder into scientific sense-making.
It's the ultimate tool for moving away from engagement theater and stepping into true epistemic agency. When the students own the intellectual heavy lifting, they stop acting like tourists in your classroom and start acting like scientists.
And engineers.
Right, and engineers. So I want to bring you all back to that solar punk Bioforge imagery we started with, the terrariums in the corner, the meticulous field notebooks, that solid verdigris teal lab bench. All of these are tools.
Right.
And just like those tools, our questioning frameworks are meant to empower students to view themselves not as passive receivers of facts, but as legitimate, capable investigators of the natural world.
When they are equipped with those cognitive tools, the classroom truly becomes a forge for the scientific mind.
Beautifully said.
Well,
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to take with you into your classroom tomorrow.
oh, I'm ready.
If we successfully train a 12-year-old 7th grader to look at a complex, messy ecosystem and immediately start sorting their raw wonder into what can be investigated with evidence versus what needs to change to solve a problem, how does that fundamentally alter the way they will approach every single crisis they face in their adult lives?